Welcome to the conversation for Skyway, a contemporary collaboration at the USF Contemporary Art Museum. I'm Margaret Miller, Director of the Institute for Research in Art, the umbrella for the Contemporary Art Museum, Graphic Studio, and Public Art in the College of the Arts at USF. I'm so pleased that you are joining us tonight. Museums are capacious spaces for personal as well as communal experiences. Our COVID isolation makes finally seeing art physically installed in museums a great pleasure. Likely the convenience of virtual panels and discussions like this one will continue, and we are pleased to keep the conversations on our website so that you can review them at any time. The exhibition Skyway, a Contemporary Collaboration embodies the connecting spirit of the Skyway Bridge that connects communities across the Tampa Bay region in counties Hillsborough, Manatee, and Pinellas. Most importantly, it provides a forum to learn about the great talent in our region. So it's a wonderful opportunity for our artists and community that the Ringling Museum, the Museum of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, the Tampa Museum of Art, and of course the Contemporary Art Museum have come together to install all of the works of 49 artists across the region. In our particular situation, we have used funding from the Lee and Victor Levengood Endowment, a gift from Stanton Store, Embrace the Arts Foundation, the Gobioff Foundation, and Dr. Alan Root. In our particular exhibition at the Contemporary Art Museum, we have 8 artists: Rosemary Shalone, Cynthia Mason, Ry McCullough, and Cody Thompson will all be talking about their work tonight. In the last conversation, the other 4 artists, Danny Dubrow, Babette Hirschberger, Kiko Katani, and Casey McDonough participated in a conversation. I want to acknowledge the curators for this project who really worked hard to bring this to fruition. The exhibition had to be postponed a year because of COVID, but the curators continued to work with the artists to produce really an extraordinary exhibition in 4 museums. The curators are Catherine Pill, Curator of Contemporary Art in St. Petersburg, Joanna Robotham at the Tampa Museum of Art, Christopher Jones and Ola Wysick at the Ringling Museum of Art, and of course, Sarah Howard, the Curator of Public Art and Social Practice at the USF CAM. The guest juror for the exhibition was independent curator Claire Tacone. Sarah Howard will lead our discussion tonight and introduce you to the artists and moderate their discussion. As I conclude, I want to remind you all that we will have a closing of the exhibition starting at 7 p.m. on August 27th. And we hope you will all join us for that celebration. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Sarah Howard, who will serve as the moderator for the evening. Sarah?
Thank you, Margaret. Good evening, and thank you for joining us this evening for this panel discussion with Rosemary Shalone, Cynthia Mason, Ry McCullough, and Cody Thompson. 4 of the artists, as Margaret described, of the 8 that are exhibiting at the Contemporary Art Museum. I'm delighted to be in conversation with 4 of these talented artists and exhibiting tonight, exhibiting at CAM's Skyway 2021, a contemporary collaboration. As I introduce tonight's program, we'd like to share some images of the installation at USF CAM for those who haven't had a chance to visit the exhibition yet. As Margaret mentioned, Skyway is a unique cultural alliance and partnership between 4 cultural institutions celebrating contemporary artists living and working in the Tampa Bay region. The exhibiting artists were selected through an open call submission process initiated in 2019 for artists residing in Hillsborough, Manatee, Pasco, Pinellas, and Sarasota counties. From over 300 submissions, the curatorial team chose approximately 60 artists to conduct studio visits with, and then made a final selection of 49 artists to be included in the 2020 exhibition which, as Margaret mentioned, needed to be rescheduled to 2021. I wish to extend special recognition to all the artists who submitted to the Skyway Open Call. It was a true pleasure to learn more about the artists living and working in our area. I'd like to acknowledge our partner museums, the Museum of Fine Arts St. Petersburg, the John and Mabel Ringley Museum of Art, and the Tampa Museum of Art, and thank their leadership and staff for their collaborative efforts to organize Skyway as one exhibition across the 4 venues. I would also like to thank the Skyway 2021 curatorial team of Catherine Pill, Joanna Robotham, Ola Woolsick, Chris Jones, and guest juror Claire Tacon for their dedicated contributions to the selection process and coordination of the illustrated catalog, which includes representation of all of the Skyway 2021 artists. I would also like to express gratitude to all of the members of CAM's team who conjure all the magic behind the scenes to facilitate our exhibitions and programs. These conversations continue to provide valuable opportunities to connect with our community of artists, advocates, and audiences, and we couldn't do it without critical funding from the USF College of the Arts and our private donors, including the Gobioff Foundation, Victor and Lee Levengood, and Dr. Alan Root. And special thanks to Brown & Brown Insurance and the Stanton Store Embrace the Arts Foundation for underwriting the Skyway 2021 publication. I invite our viewers to add questions, any questions you might have, into the Q&A window on Zoom or comment sections on Facebook and Instagram Live, and we will be happy to get to those towards the end of the conversation. The panelist bios will be posted in the chat for reference. I would encourage you to use Speaker View for the best viewing experience. In addition, live transcription is available at the bottom of your screen for viewers using the Zoom platform. If you haven't had a chance to view the exhibition in person, there is a navigable virtual model of the museum, photo documentation, and a PDF of the exhibition brochure on the Skyway's 2021 exhibition webpage on CAM's website. I hope you all will have a chance to visit the 4 concurrent Skyway 2021 exhibitions at the partner museums. Before I introduce the artists on our panel, I would like to take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the traditional homelands and territories of the Seminole, as well as other historical groups, including the Calusa and Tocobaga, that those of us on the Florida's Gulf Coast are learning, working, and organizing today. Presently, the state of Florida is home to the Seminole, Miccosukee, Muskogee, and Choctaw, and to individuals of many other Native groups. As a cultural institution, we recognize the historical and continuing impacts of colonization on Indigenous communities, their resilience in the face of colonial and state-sponsored violence, and fully support Indigenous sovereignty. We will continue to work to be accountable for an institutional ethos that embodies a commitment to human rights, justice, and cultural equity for all. Now to introduce our featured Skyway 2021 artists and hear more about their work. Rosemarie Chirlon's work explores the physical and psychological boundaries of human connection through the visual structure of text. Her handmade books, perforated works on paper, and sculptural installations incorporate graphic expressions of poetry layered with social and political contexts that are somewhat obscured and challenging to decipher, provoking translation and meaning to be expanded by the viewer. Rosemarie lives and works in Miami and Tampa, Florida. Cynthia Mason's recent series explores the artifice of humans' authority over the natural world in our age of the Anthropocene. Fascinated by the overlap and edges of topographies, her work references corporeal and geological forms that gesture to a link between our own skin and the surface of the earth. Bridging the mediums of painting and sculpture, Mason's limp and precariously supported forms threaten to unravel and collapse, suggesting the instability and inadequacy of our social systems to respond to our fraught relationship with the natural environment. Cynthia lives and works in St. Petersburg, Florida. Rye McCullough's practice engages the fields of printmaking, creative writing, drawing, sound, and sculpture to create unique systems that probe the margins and boundaries of how art crafts language and communicates meaning. Using these systems of making as a guide for a range of media processes, McCullough's parameters have the potential to expand or collapse, generating opportunities for discovery in his thematic investigations of the philosophical, abstract, and fluid state of being across time and space. Ry lives and works in Tampa, Florida, where he is an assistant professor of art and design at the University of Tampa. Cody Thompson crafts ceramic sculptures using a unique language of personal symbols inspired by urban design found in graffiti, architecture, and skateboarding culture. Translating two-dimensional shapes into three-dimensional forms, Thompson's ongoing material exploration and expanding visual lexicon transcends ancient and modern forms of communication and invites decoding and interpretation from multiple perspectives. Cody lives and works in St. Petersburg, Florida, where he is the Clay Studio Artist Program Manager at the Morian Center for Clay. It's wonderful to be in conversation with you all this evening, and I'm excited to explore your distinct approaches to communicating meaning in your work and through your unique visual languages. Rosemarie, let's start with you. Your work translates poetic text into graphic visual forms realized through hand-perforated works on paper and books that expand into elegant and delicate sculptural forms to address critical social and political issues. Would you discuss your creative approach for translating these poems into a visual language and how they evolve into sculptural works to be deciphered or read by the viewer?
Well, my work for Skyway was inspired by the current moment of political upheaval and social reckoning. The work explores the physical and psychological boundaries of human connection and disconnection against the backdrop of racial division, nationwide protests, COVID pandemic, and the presidential election. And during this turmoil and seclusion, I embraced the opportunity to work with the poet Susan Weiner. I used linguistic elements to form the imagery, and that's challenging to read or conceal. So it's more of a design, and then as you look at it, then you can decipher things. You can decipher the text if you wish. The poetic text consists of layers of meaning that the individual can reconstruct, deconstruct, or expand, allowing the work to be interpreted on a personal, communal, or global platform. So the concept of the work and the text dictates the material that I choose, whether it's paper, whether it's a book form, whether it's an installation, or if it's fabric. And the graphic space plays a central role in both the design and meaning. So my choice of artistic discipline and how I envision the viewer to interact. So for example, the sculptural piece that's on the floor, I felt that it needed to be below, that people can observe the piece from above and be able to walk around it. The books, I have an affinity for the books because I like texture and I like people to touch. So books are a wonderful format for the viewer to have that tactile experience. And as far as consequence, the piece that's on the wall, the cloth piece, I wanted the fabric to be almost like skin, and the coloration of various skin tones, and then I embraced embroidering on the fabric, and it's read either with one word, or it's on a diagonal, or it's upside down, but it really translates to the meaning of how I place the text onto whether it's paper or fabric.
And it's so beautiful the way you're dealing with this really powerful content, and words that are describing these conditions, but they're so elegant and delicate. I mean, the works are so delicate, yet there's like a power in that delicacy and sort of the fragility of works on paper and sort of these, more vulnerable materials, if you will. But you also have a flag that's part of the exhibition, which is a powerful statement also. Can you talk a little bit about the flag, which is titled Equity?
Well, equity was, because we're going through this turmoil about racism, and the whole idea about our country was equality. So, it was very simple. It's 4 by 6. Each panel is 2 by 6, but between the colors is a red fabric that symbolizes the bloodshed to achieve the equity, which we still haven't achieved.
Right.
And I like the fact that it is a flag. I like the fact that it's going to be worn, it's going to be torn, it's going to weather, and just like we weather the issues, the turmoil.
The conditions,
Yes.
the environmental conditions, yeah. Well, it's really wonderful. And can you talk a little bit more about the Mask of Corona, which is one of the books that's in the show, and your choice to translate it into Spanish and Creole from English, and so in 3 editions, or edition of 3?
Well, Susan and I discussed this, and we felt that Spanish and Creole were essential because they were the populations that probably had less access to the vaccine, and probably were more affected by getting the virus. And it's interesting because years ago, Jim Finley was the director of the Vienna's Museum of the Modern Book, and he only collects editions, and I wasn't doing editions, and I don't like to do something over and over again that's the same. And there's a beauty about the difference in using different languages, because it changes the whole design, it changes the whole feeling of a piece, and I do that often. I usually do, my editions are usually translated in different languages.
Well, that also provides so much more access, right?
I agree.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. All right, let's move on to Cody. One of the reasons I kind of grouped the 4 of you together is because of your exploration of these visual languages. And Cody, through your experimentation and exploration of ceramics, you've developed your own personal lexicon, a visual alphabet of symbols, complete with sort of a lowercase or smaller and a larger uppercase shapes inspired by forms from urban design. In your new work, the shapes from your alphabet are in an expanding dialogue with one another. Can you take us through this process of discovery to initially create this alphabet and then build on this unique language through these sculptural forms?
Certainly. So this body of work has been evolving basically since my second to last semester of graduate school. And I think what I love the most about this body of work, these sculptures, is how it used to be my surface. So these 3-dimensional forms have come from 2-dimensional surface designs. And I was introduced to ceramics through pottery on the wheel. So for years I was making functional pots. And if you're familiar with, making functional wares, you have this desire to make a surface, or to get a surface on these pieces that is your own and that is different from everybody else's. So I was working hard on this, trying to create this successful surface that I liked. And eventually I started cropping out smaller areas of the surfaces and eventually turn those into the shapes of the dies. And slowly I made the smaller versions of those dies out of wood, and then eventually plasma cut larger versions out of steel, and then eventually made my own extruder. So the 2D became the 3D. And I think that's, I really think that's my favorite part about the sculptures. And the physicality of working on the scale and the thickness, the amount of clay that I use to create the pieces is really important to me. It pushes the limits of clay. And I've always been very physical. So I hold that dear to my heart, you know, staying moving and squatting, lifting, wedging, all of that is really important to my practice and to my process. The shapes themselves came from graffiti inspiration and also architectural designs. I grew up skateboarding, so we were always kind of observing architecture and kind of through a different lens. You kind of see smaller details that, you know, maybe the normal person wouldn't spy walking down the street, you know, how a curb meets a sidewalk or a handrail, then all the textures that are involved with all of that as well. So there's really a lot behind the shapes, but they kind of end up being these elegant, abstract forms that allow the viewer to kind of interpret and take out of it what they want.
That's great. I can see that now, like thinking about the object sketches and how some of those, like, you know, would have the potential to be sort of like ridden by a skateboard, right? Can you talk a little bit about the finishes? I know we talked about this when you were installing, a little bit about your exploration of the finishes, because I think in the object sketches, which is the installation of the more colorful works that are on the wall, there's a lot of, it looks like a lot of experimentation and play going on there.
Certainly, yeah. So again, back to making pots, I was kind of stuck with this idea that you had to use ceramic finishes, ceramic surfaces on your ceramic work. And I'm slowly realizing that it's not necessary. So I've started to kind of play with some other acrylic paints, some other mediums on the clay surface. So some acrylic, some spray paint, but still keeping some ceramic surface on there as well. So with some of them, I will put a black underglaze wash, so a thin black color that I can then sponge off to kind of highlight texture. And then I can go over top of that with acrylic or spray paint, maybe using masking tape to create, you know, surface shapes over top of the three-dimensional forms.
That seems to be really effective, even in like the large sculptures, how that extruded surface is really highlighted through that black underwash. And it was striking me, we were doing a tour the other day and sort of talking about, now we sort of frame everything through like a digital lens, because that's the kind of world that we're living in. But the idea of this extrusion, that you're doing it through this analog method that sometimes I think can be perceived as being digital, even though it's, you know, entirely handcrafted, which is kind of interesting translation of our understanding of how forms are being generated in our contemporary society.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is that there was so much computer work involved with like the CNC work, the plasma stuff that I was doing to create the steel dies and the steel parts to fabricate the extruder that I use to create the pieces. So there's some interesting relationship there too.
Yeah. So do you imagine them all at all digitally before you make them? I mean, when you're making the dies, and are you using digital ways? Because I know once you extrude them, often you work them independently and maybe cut or alter them and sort of put them back together in new forms and shapes, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, honestly, I don't really envision the finished piece so much when I'm extruding. And part of the reason I love making the larger pieces so much is because there's so much clay there, and I'm extruding solid. So it's common to extrude pieces of clay hollow. And if you were to do that and cut it in half, you would have this opening. But if you extrude solid, when you cut it in half, you create a plane. So I can kind of start to play with a wire tool or other tools to alter this solid chunk of clay to reveal all of these different planes interacting with one another.
Yeah, and this is like, I mean, this is pretty challenging, right? To like be working with clay this thick.
Yes, yeah, it pushes the limits. I've definitely had a lot of failures. It's not common to fire clay that's more than like an inch thick. I know there are artists that do it, but it involves a lot of other, it brings in a lot of other variables. You can have a lot of cracking or explosions in the kiln, which I've experienced all of that. But it's part of what keeps the work interesting and keeps me on my toes.
I can see that. Well, it's great to see this whole process that you've developed evolving and, you know, going into sort of new territory. So we're excited to see what comes next.
Excellent, thank you.
Let's pivot to Rye. Rye, you often work thematically, delving deep into a conceptual framework, which you translate and expand upon across various media, including works on paper, sculpture, sound, compositions, and zines. Your project for Skyway, Themes for a Left-Handed Pitcher, is inspired by your deep affection for baseball and the perfect game Los Angeles Dodgers Sandy Koufax has pitched against the Chicago Cubs in 1965. The work includes 3 installations with representations of a domestic pitcher and black and white balls presented as still life tableaus in both a sculptural and pictorial formats. However, these elements have material and compositional differences that provide the viewer with a sense of playful discovery and comparative dialogue. Would you speak about how this perfect baseball game inspired this project and how you approach the material translation of these specific forms through different media?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having us. And I'm just so honored to be amongst this really talented group. I can't say it enough, but I'm just so happy to be a part of it. So in my work, I'm kind of outwardly facing, I'm a printmaker. And so within that, there's this deep history of use of the multiple and this idea of publishing and distribution. And I always kind of found that one of the biggest limitations of print media was the size of the press. And I quickly found out that if I just made more of something and started to distribute it, you could have a very small print that could go across the country, across the world, and multiple people could kind of have a component of that work. And I thought, oh, that's monumental. That has to do with scale, and it has to do with a very democratic form. And so that's one of my starting points. And so this project takes that as like that's the foundation of upon which I was building. Much like my fellow panelists and a lot of contemporary artists, we kind of spring from a lot of different traditions. And so printmaking would be one of them. The other would be conceptual art, and especially American conceptual art of the kind of the 50s through the 70s, and thinking about setting up situations that you allow to play out. And so immediately when I knew that I was going to be at CAM, my first project, which definitely changed, but I was really excited by the opportunity of these 3 different spaces. And I wanted to inhabit those 3 different spaces to highlight this idea of a kind of a dispersal of small components that would then create one piece that has a really large and maybe an elusive scale. As far as Sandy Koufax and the left-handed pitcher, it really started more with the tradition of still life. And I have been kind of committed to working with still life for, really since the beginning of lockdown in the pandemic. It was just a moment where it was a form that I thought really spoke to self-reflection. And in conceptual art, I feel like, if you think about Joseph Kosuth, there's this idea of like setting up little tautologies, like something that references itself over and over again in several different ways. And so this was like a wonderful marriage between the behavior or the inherent qualities of print media and the behavior and the tradition or the canon of American conceptual art. And so this process or this project kind of grew from that. Of course, I think that maybe one of my personal beefs with conceptual art is that it's just dry. It's dry like toast sometimes, and there's like one entry point, and if you don't find the key, then you're kind of lost. And so it was important to me that in creating a conceptual scenario like this, that it was going to have as many antenna communicating and attracting a viewer as I possibly could. At the same time, I'm kind of wrestling with the idea of like, what does it mean to be an American artist right now? And whether that is through the idea of like watching kind of American birds in your backyard, or whether it's listening to a baseball game on the radio, those are lenses through which I can start to ask myself really much deeper questions about ethics, about personal responsibility. And so I'm going to give you the little story, the short story, I promise. And I was up very late at night, 3, 4 in the morning, rocking my daughter to sleep. And I look at our table and I see this pitcher, this green ceramic pitcher, and it was turned in such a way I was like, that is a left-handed pitcher. And I just thought that was the funniest thing. And there's this, I have a belief that absurdity can lead me to a higher state of consciousness and a higher sense of awareness of like my reality. And so that phrase kind of stuck with me, left-handed pitcher, left-handed pitcher. And of course, my favorite left-handed pitcher historically is Sandy Koufax, not just because he was an amazing baseball player, but he was also a man that was really bound to his principles. And so I love the idea of the perfect game having a relationship to like the mechanics of contemporary art, but I also just wish that this would be an opportunity for people to investigate and research Sandy Koufax, because that same year, 1965, he did pitch the perfect game, but also he refused to pitch the first game of the World Series because it fell on Yom Kippur. And so in some sense, this project has to do with personal responsibility and self-reflection.
Thank you. That was really,
Sorry, that was meaty.
no, but it's very compelling and it gives us so much to chew on. It's there's also this palindromic score that's part of the work. And can you talk a little bit about that and sort of the development of the zine?
Yes, absolutely. And so there are kind of installations proper in the museum, which consist of like the table and works on paper in close proximity. But then emanating from those platforms is this score, the sound piece, which sometimes you have to open yourself up to a little sense of play. And I think that's important. And as I was making these drawings of the pitcher with the a white ball and a black ball, I just started to conjure these really kind of fun, playful, curious sounds that would meander. And so I just started to write music for these still life drawings. And these are like 2-inch by 2-inch drawings. They're like the most unsuspecting little things, but those kind of became a score. And I saw the balls as like having, when you played the soundtrack with it, they had the potential to kind of like maybe at night in the museum, one ball would roll off of the platform and start bouncing through the exhibition. This is just my imagination. I don't think it really happens. But to have sound within an architectural space, we're also talking about filling that volume. We're also talking about the opportunity to take something very small and allow that scale to expand. And so the sound was very important. The other components that are involved with the project, there's a zine, which is populated with a collection of baseball cards. I used the structure of a baseball card to create these little compositions that tie the ceramic left-handed pitcher to the history of Sandy Koufax in this baseball card format. It's in the bookstore, check it out. And if you don't want to purchase it, there is a QR code at every station that you can download the digital version of the zine for free and the version of the soundtrack together. And then finally, to also kind of like my little cherry on top of like this sense of like, how do we engage more people with conceptual art? How do we invite more people to participate in contemporary art? If you visit the museum, there is a bowl of commemorative pins, buttons that look similar to this, that have imagery from all of those layers that are put into a blender. So I challenge you all to collect them all.
Thank you, Rye. And I agree. When I've been walking through the museum and that score is going, it does feel like there's this kind of, it has that ping pong kind of bouncing ball. I can't quite place it, but there's some reference to that I haven't found yet, but it just makes it and it fills the space. It really does.
Well, and just that phrase ping ponging, that's kind of a strategy in recording, like recorded sound. When you record something to another format, you're ping ponging it, and you're allowing it to kind of degrade, you're allowing it to spread out, you're allowing it to be a reference to the volume in which that it's recorded. And so that kind of, that, I guess, characteristic or quality combined with this palindrome that it starts just like it would finish. It's like a sonic Rorschach. If you looked at the sound waves, it would look like a little Rorschach ink blot. So you travel a path that returns to itself, much like the sculpture that's referring to the works on paper and the works on paper that are referring to the sculpture. And then, of course, just for a nice little through line, there is also audio recording from the game that was called Of the Perfect Game that Sandy Koufax threw in 1965, and Vin Scully's amazing voice is unauthorized, of course, but is kind of woven throughout that composition. I don't think Vin would mind.
I don't think so either. I think it's amazing. And it really, it kind of pushed me and our exhibition designer to expand the way that we would have installed the show, because, you know, we spread your work out through the 3 galleries, and then it kind of opened up a whole nother dialogue to happen, a whole nother opportunity for a conversation to happen with the works and how they were installed in conversation with one another. So thank you for that.
Thank you. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Okay, Cynthia. These new works included in Skyway build off your previous works exploring humans' fraught relationship with our natural environment. You use a range of contrasting materials and forms to convey the structural and systematic inadequacies of humans to address environmental concerns in our anthropogenic age. Would you speak about your process in developing these structural and organic forms, and how your choice of materials and process embeds meaning within the work?
Absolutely. First, thank you so much for this amazing opportunity. I'm like still just on cloud 9, even just being on this panel and listening to these 3 other artists talk. It's just awesome. So thank you to the donors and USF CAM and Skyway. So in this work with Skyway, I'm really inspired by the grid, architecture, early forms of writing, and the failure of human-made systems. I use the grid as a main starting point in basically everything I do. As a former architecture student in the 90s, the grid was literally drilled into my being. So it's really how I see and transform space, color, shape, and form. Like, I just can't get away from it. It's like my daily life. And so the grid, as we know, we use it to navigate space. We use it to chart new territories and to dominate and control. So I'm really interested in using the grid as a point of reference for humans' repeated failure to the environment and to ourselves. I'll also say that my titles and materials are an integral part of my practice. I consider them to be a point of conversation with the viewer, where I sometimes use dark humor as a connection point. And then my materials are also a nod to an action, an activity, or a moment in time. So for example, I'm using shredded documents to stuff the work, and there's this idea of dishonesty and cover-ups that plagues human existence, and I really want to reference that with the work. Then you'll notice in an aristocratic limp grid, I use marble dust to rub it into the surface so it appears dusted and powdered like an aristocrat. So I like this idea of classic marble sculptures disintegrating and turning into marble dust. Also, I'll say gravity is my best friend. Like, I love a sagging form. I can't get away from that. It implies so much, you know, a slouch, a failing structure, a lapse of time. So I want to use gravity to create an analogy to all of our human-made systems that we see struggle and sometimes fail. And then color application, that's another element that shifts a lot with the work. So in an aristocratic limp grid, I wanted the 2 pink circles of color to feel really soft and blush-like. And it took so many applications and layers of me building up the color, and then it was too saturated, so I had to knock it back again. So there is just this process that takes a while when you have something in your head, and it's just got to be exactly as you want it. But then in Limp Pricks and Plants and Rising Water, you know, I really wanted a different color application. I wanted the viewer to feel the various water levels we face due to global warming and climate change. So for that one, I dip dyed the piece. So it had this intended like rising water level. And so to do that, I had to figure out a new process for this larger piece, and found a game cleaning tripod to hoist the work up and then dip it into the large vat of dye. So yeah, my materials and my process like drastically shift with the work. And I actually have really started embracing that uncertainty. So.
Yeah, I think we've all learned to embrace some uncertainty
Yes.
in this past year, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, the works, it's like they're so striking, and as you look closer, you start to see these, you know, these mixture of the media with the, you know, orifices are sort of lined with velvet, and pools, the fluids pooling in some areas, and other things are being propped up, and your format for installation where you're engaging the floor.
Yes.
And so, you know, kind of really pushing the boundaries of both sculpture and painting. And can you talk a little bit about your, you know, decision-making process in that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So, you know, I really consider myself a painter, and like I consider these paintings. I've been told the opposite, like, no, these are really sculptures. So I'm really like half and half, but I am traditionally a painter. Like, I love a good landscape painting. I love a good still life. Like, those are my favorite things. Like, I was just at the Met last week, and that's what I gravitate towards. So I'm a painter. But I'm also this failed architect. So I also like really want to understand structure. And I love the fact that I like build things and they kind of like fall apart. And so that's why I dropped out of architecture school, because none of my models matched up, but they liked that part of it, but they were just dissatisfied that it wasn't intentional, you know? So see, I have a really weird relationship between sculpture and painting. I'm not really quite sure where it lands, but personally, I consider them paintings. So.
Great, thank you. Okay. Some of you have touched on this, and I want to invite our entire panel of artists to, you know, join in this conversation and discussion together. And we talked on, some of you touched on this a little bit in your introductions, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what it means to be an artist working in this moment in time. And, you know, we know the power of art, that the power that art has to reflect the culture of our moment and offer new ways of seeing from diverse perspectives. But from your personal perspective, what do you feel is the social role of the contemporary artist?
I'll go first. I guess imagine a world without art or architecture or dance or writing or, film. I think that would be the answer. I think it's just so important for us to share visually and through writing, movement, how we're perceiving events that are going on right now. I mean, these become documentation, these become historical notes that people will reference. So I think it's like super important that we are all engaged into what's going on around us socially.
Thank you.
Yeah, well said, Cynthia. It's all around us, right? We're all experiencing it, and I think COVID allowed this like opportunity for art to be re-seen. At least like I kind of tend to lean towards ceramics specifically. In this case, just there's like this new love for it, and like the handmade, and it's just interesting to see how that has changed even in the last year and a half since the pandemic started.
Thanks. Rosemary or Rye, do you have anything you want to add?
I think that art is an expression of the moment. And I think that what we've gone through the last 4 years or more has been real turmoil personally, and as far as communities and in our nation. We're all immigrants. I mean, my family came from Italy. They left Italy to come to America to have a better life. And all these things that we say that we were, right now, we haven't been demonstrating that that's what our country is about. And I think it's hard to digest. And I think that for me, the pandemic has allowed me to be in the studio to reflect about all these issues. I work every day, even before all this was going on, and I work a long time, like 8 hours a day in the studio every day. Even if I'm traveling, I'll bring sewing material or something like that I'm working on. But I find that it's been very difficult, because people who I thought were friends, I can't relate to their ideas and their political positions. And it has forced me to almost not want them to be my friends. So it's been a difficult time. It's been a very difficult time.
Agreed.
I don't know if I answered your question, but
No,
I think that my work has been a reflection of the moment and my feelings of how I was digesting everything and my principles.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
I would definitely echo that. I think that it does put a lot of things on the line for contemporary artists. I think that how we participate, how we interface with the world is vitally important. Like, who are you showing up for? Are you here for to participate in the largest unregulated commodities market? Are you here for fame? Are you here for your community? Are you here for acknowledgement? Are you here for mourning? And I think that all of those things really point to the fact that as a contemporary artist right now, we have to re-engage with ideas of like what it means to be a citizen.
Exactly. And I think that art is a form of activism.
Yeah, most most definitely, most definitely. My process was a little different. It was a little more inward facing, of
Mhm.
like creating a venue for more self-reflection, more personal responsibility. And so I think that that idea of the solitary artist as kind of turning away from society, like we can all just throw that in the can. We had to be isolated, and then we also had to be socially engaged. And so it is a complex, wonderful, beautiful, tragic time to be a contemporary artist, and I'm proud to be it.
Thank you for the generous comments. That kind of leads me into my next question, which Rosemary kind of has already sort of addressed about this period of isolation and social distance, and how, so many of us are just now beginning to acclimate to living with the pandemic and connecting with the creative community at large and in person again. And, as this has been the most challenging and transformational period in most of our lives, coping with personal, collective loss and grief, and finding comfort and hope and the resilience with our community. And it may be too early to fully reflect on what impact this had on our lives in a long view sense. But I'm curious to inquire about your thoughts about how the pandemic and events over this past year have impacted your practice.
I think for me, I've been more direct in my messages. I think that I've always addressed social and political issues, but in a more abstract form. Even the work that's in there, like in the marrow. I mean, you could look at the imagery, and if you can decipher the words, or if you read the text panel, it might not necessarily, a viewer might not necessarily reflect on what I thought the work was about. But for me, it had to do with love and goodness versus greed and power. But someone else could read it and it could just be something that's very personal, and what's within your soul, and it could be spiritual. But later with the COVID thing, and with consequence, and even otherness, it was more direct. And even the flag, it was just more direct.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I must have lived, when I was young, I must have been very protected, because I had no idea about the history of Italians in America. And my grandparents came over, but not until I was an adult did I find out that Italians were lynched in the South. And, and once I found that out, it really made me wonder why the heck I'm living in the South. But I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's really made me want to start researching more to see what other people were affected by white supremacy.
Yeah, I think we're just starting to sort of uncover a lot of this hidden history.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have anything to share about, sort of how their practice may have been impacted this past year and a half?
I'll share. I'll say, I probably have been so impatient with myself up until the pandemic. I think I've just found a new set of rules for being patient in general, just with other people, myself, my process, my work. And it really calls to mind, I remember 25 years ago when I was studying architecture, and I was speaking to this young guy. We were both young, but I was just really upset at the time. I was just like, how do you really change the world? What are you really supposed to do? And so what he told me, he was like, we were sitting on a park bench and he was like, you really change it one park bench at a time. It's one interaction at a time. It's one positive interaction, like you carry that inside you. And so every interaction you have is a moment to make a change. And so like that to me has become really powerful from COVID and just the civil rights movement that's happening right now. It's like the patience with yourself and with everyone else is so important. And even if you're talking to someone who's totally opposite, like totally opposite viewpoint, you really still have to find that common thread, because that's the only way that we're going to survive this, I think. So.
Good advice. Ryan, did you want to share anything?
Yeah. Yes. So my practice completely changed. I had been working in kind of non-objective materialist abstraction for the last 4 years, and of course there were other components, but I've told this story before to a number of you. When lockdown happened, when we're kind of dealing with trauma from a lot of different places, I had a friend that asked me, how can we possibly make the same thing that we made yesterday? How can we not use this as a foil to enact change within ourselves, within our own creative practice? And maybe that means the intention changes. Maybe that means the process changes. Maybe it doesn't mean the visual or the surface changes that much, but the meat and the true energy of the work has to change. And so it just upturned everything. And so, Sarah, if it's okay, I can tell my story of our studio visit. We had a studio visit. It was great. And we had a great plan. And excuse me, sorry. We had this really great plan. And maybe 8 months later, I was like tentatively writing this little email of like, so can we meet? I just want to do something totally different. And I had written the piece. I tend to kind of write pieces out like a script. And so I had written the piece and presented it to Sarah. And I'm really thankful for the faith that you had in those really horrible digital renderings. But it gave me an opportunity to change course and really apply my heart to the work that I'm making now. And not that the past body of work didn't have my heart in it, but it's just a whole renewed sense of conviction and of purpose and sense of intention when I go to the studio.
That's great. Thank you, Rye. Cody, do you have anything to add, or do you want me to move on?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. The pandemic didn't really affect my body of work specifically. It had a much greater effect on my life. So there was a lot going on, where I'm working shut down for, we closed to the public. My girlfriend and I bought a house. So there was all this other stuff that ended up happening during all of this. So I kind of stuck to my original plan for the most part, for the work for Skyway. But I definitely found myself thinking about family and friends and, all of these other people that I've come in contact with and become friends with in St. Petersburg since I've moved back here, while I was making work. So that's really where the pandemic kind of played into my body of work.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think we were all, kind of looking at our lives in new ways and how those relationships became impacted as kind of an ongoing process. So thanks for sharing. So before we open up to see if our audience has any questions, which I encourage them to put in the question and answer session or question and answer section, which we'll move on to in a minute. I wanted to ask you all about your experience in Skyway. Many local artists have the opportunity to exhibit independently and in dialogue with one another in shows across the region. Yet Skyway offers an expanded context for work being made in this historic moment in our lives and really representing an overview of the work, the contemporary work in Tampa Bay. Would you speak to what being part of this iteration of Skyway means to you?
Well, I don't know. I think that this collaborative effort between the four institutions expanded the cultural landscape and provides a visible communal platform. And it fosters a unified force that cultivates creativity and inspiration. And I think it's necessary. I think, you know, that's what makes for artistic centers across the world. You have to, you can't separate. You have to work in totality. And I think that you're fortunate you have young or creative curators that are energetic and have a vision. And you're doing something that's really great. There's a quote from Bina Chow, a curator and director of Casco Art Institute, working for the Commons in Utrecht, Netherlands. And she says that it's the communities that give legitimacy to the institution. And the reason why the institution should exist, not an abstract public spectership. What we care about is how to relate to one another, how to consider diverse, different levels and entrances of understanding and relation to something. And I like that. I like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I'll say like, for me, like, so being able to show in an exhibition space where like internationally known contemporary artists have shown, like, it's just so mind-blowing to me. And it just is just amazing. And it just gives the emerging artist like this broad platform that is kind of unheard of, you know? It's hard to get museum shows. And I really hope other museums follow your lead because it's an entry point and there's a lot of us out there. And I just think it's just such an amazing, thrilling moment to be able to show in an internationally known museum, you know? So I really hope like other museums do this for their regional artists because it's huge. It's just absolutely huge. So thank you again.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, it's such a wonderful reminder, and like the quality and the kind of the integrity of the work that's being made in our region. I think oftentimes we downplay, like, oh, I'm just going to my studio, I'm just like pushing paint around today, and it's a very humble thing. But to see it, to echo what Cynthia was saying, to see it within the context and for the work to have this kind of gravitas, for the work to be honored through this partnership is beautiful. And I'm so grateful for it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone pretty much said what I was thinking. I really hope that other institutions pick up on this collaborative opportunity because it's an amazing experience for the artists, and it's only going to make us come together more if that continues.
Yeah, I think the sort of symbolic icon of the bridge, you know, is a really wonderful no McCurr and sort of metaphor for the benefits of Skyway and the impetus for it, the need for it. And, you know, it really was great to have this to focus on during the pandemic and be able to connect with all of you and stay in dialogue through this as we sort of navigated like what was going to happen or what we thought was going to happen. And so it's been a real pleasure working with all of you. Let's turn to some of our audience questions. We've got a question from a fellow Skyway artist, Akiko Katani, asks, the comic seems to be a part of each of your work. Is this important to you or of importance to you?
Yes, 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 yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, the humor is probably one of my important tools in my toolbox. I love humor, and I think it's such an important gateway to be able to speak to people through humor. Like, you know, Dave Chappelle, his very first skit was a blind Black Ku Klux Klan man. And that to me was just, again, just the beauty of humor, to be able to speak to really, really difficult topics and themes in our society. It's like probably the only way we're going to be able to communicate with people who have just such opposing viewpoints. So humor is number one in my book.
Anyone else want to address humor?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I agree with Cindy that very few important conversations ever started with like a document that got slammed down on the table, like no progress. And so this kind of part of our tool belt as artists is to kind of invite folks to come in and to come dialogue with us and to share something. And the fact that humor or comedy is it's an epiphany in its own kind. And if we're trying to have communication, if we're trying to deliver a message and trying to kind of orchestrate these small epiphanies for people to have within the gallery space, what a better vehicle? What a better vehicle than to have a laugh, a chuckle, you know.
Really does break down the barriers. On that, it gets to a different kind of emotion.
Yes.
Yeah.
A better one for sure.
And it's like humor is this wonderful and under maybe it hasn't been given its due as far as its intellectual gravity. And it really, the funniest people are the smartest people. And they, you know, it's about kind of navigating so many different things, whether it's our expectations that get upturned or whether it's like slipping on the banana peel at just the wrong time. Like those things are a part of our, like I said before, it's a part of our tool belt. And God, I want to spend my life laughing.
Yeah.
Really do want to spend my life laughing. I've known so many artists in my life that they just hurt their own feelings over and over again and just, you know, they just take it so seriously. Not that I don't take it seriously, but I like take a laugh very seriously.
Does anybody else want to field Akiko's question about humor or comedy? Okay, we've got another question for Rye from Kathy Gibson. And she compliments everyone in the exhibition. She walked through the show today and noticed the tables in all 3 installs of your work. They were lower than she expected. Is there a reason for that? By the way, she loved it.
Thanks, Kathy. Hi, Kathy. Again, I think that to reiterate this idea of the small component, the unexpected, the often overlooked part of an artwork being a node on a huge network, it was important that they had this like smaller, almost like underwhelmingness. Like they're anti-monuments. They're totally like they almost feel like miniature tables. And I liked that idea of like them feeling small and then having sound emanating from them. They start to kind of like expand their potential.
Yeah, and they almost felt like children's tables in a way, you know,
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, we're gonna just sit on the floor and, you know, have tea or whatever.
Yeah, and oftentimes when I go to museums or galleries, there's a like, you know, we all kind of have discussed the aura of like the heroic, the monumental artwork. And if you take something and you lower it, you like literally bring it down to the ground level closer. It's like my feeling or my hope was that someone would try to touch the I mean, I really hope they don't because they'll break. But there's that like inspiring that desire of like, I want to touch it. I need to touch it. And for it to not have a case around it, for it not to be on a platform of any kind, you start to have this like little tug of war of impulse that I think is wonderful. And
I agree with you.
I've had those experiences, and I get that feeling with the piece that's the I don't want to call them handkerchiefs, but they
Yeah.
are handkerchiefs. I love
Well, I know that they're just material that I sewed together, but they could be handkerchiefs. I mean, they look like handkerchiefs.
Yeah, that combined with the bricks on the floor,
Yeah.
like I see, like those really, like they inspire. Like I'm gonna fluff that, or I'm gonna just touch the brick or something, or
Yeah.
flip a page.
Well,
Like
I
that
think
impulse to engage materiality and sensuality is a funny thing, and it's
well,
like
I think when you put something over something, you're obscuring the view of the piece. And I have to say, my grandson came to the exhibition last week with me, and he's only 2.5 years old. He loved your work. He really wanted to touch it, but he didn't. But I mean, I think it should be, you know, it's a way of offering an engagement. You know, being low, being without glass in front of it. You know, just like the 2-dimensional piece that I have on the wall that with the 6 panels, the glass is like a barrier. You know, we have enough barriers.
And this is also, I think, one characteristic of the collective of all of us in this particular exhibition is there is a lot of kind of sensual materiality going on. And I knew I was going to have like kind of like really maybe not as luscious as like I want to hug Cindy's pieces or let them envelop me or something, you know what I mean? And Cody are so slick and they feel like they're made for hands. I had to understand my position in the larger collective.
Sarah, you're muted.
Apologies.
That's okay.
My husband came home from work and I was trying to subdue those sounds. Cynthia, this question is for you. This question's about your materials and what they're made from, and are they canvas? And I always encourage people when I'm in the galleries to read your material lists on the labels because they are fascinating.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Thank you for the question. Yeah, no, my materials, it's an ongoing process with each piece. Like I definitely working on a piece and having conversations with the intention of the pieces, more materials will be added, like with aristocratic lip grip, soft pink circles. I hadn't planned to put marble dust in that piece, but you know, after the piece for a while, I'm like, it needs marble dust because that's what I want to reference in the work, these dying classical ideas of classical sculpture and just kind of jumping in that way. So the materials are really as important as the piece itself. And so as the title, like the materials list are the title. Like I think there's a conversation there where you use kind of low economical status materials with higher economical status materials. That starts a conversation. But yeah, materials are like such a happy place for me. And I hope that never ends.
I also kind of felt like you were being very environmentally conscious in your material
Yes.
choices.
I try. I've been using junk mail for, I think, 13 years now, maybe, in my work. Maybe not quite that long, but I love this idea of using materials that are going to be thrown away. You know, I think like we really do owe that to the planet right now to like start really taking stock of the materials we use, the longevity of them. So yeah, it's really important.
Yeah, and you keep everything kind of like sort of natural to the degree. I mean, the velvet is obviously, you know,
Right.
yeah.
And I love that velvet. Like the velvet to me, those black holes in the work for myself, it really creates a moment of wonder. So is that a hole in the wall behind the piece? What is that? Can I stick my hand through it? I really want it to communicate a sense of wonder with that black velvet. So yeah.
Very effective.
Thank you.
So let me turn to my colleagues and see, because I can't see them, if we have any additional questions from our social media channels of Facebook or Instagram. We've got a few minutes left. If anybody has any questions they would like to address. Looks like we don't have anything on the media channels. Well, I guess we can wrap up a little early. I want to thank you all so much for attending and sharing and participating and providing this really unique opportunity to hear from you and access more about your work and your practice and your lives. And so I just want to thank you all for your generosity. I want to encourage everyone who can to attend our in-person reception on August 27th. It'll be sort of our first in life back to reality of being able to be around one another in person event to celebrate the closing of Skyway. I also encourage everyone to view all the exhibitions at our concurrent venues and check out their programs and additional events that will be coming up this summer. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.